It's not too often that I get told that a trigger is too light and too good on a guy's rifle, but here we are. So right now we are sitting right in there at around 13 ounces. And that is really light for a coyote hunting rifle, especially if you're wearing gloves. Marrying up to this trigger, you just barely feel anything before this thing goes off. So, to make this a little bit safer, we're going to go ahead and throw in this drop-in trigger. So, let's go over this rifle just a little bit. This is a buddy of mine's rifle. He purchased this used to hunt some coyotes and stuff with it. It is a Ruger M77 Mark II. And it is chambered in 25-06. He really likes 25-06 for some odd reason, but hey, there's something wrong with everybody. He bought this thing to do some coyote hunting with, but this trigger, being that light, you know, here January, February, we start getting down into -5, -10, chasing coyotes, wearing some gloves. You know, he's worried that he's actually accidentally going to have an ND with this thing, so he would like to actually get a trigger that's a little bit heavier than this here. It's been kind of swaying on the trigger pull gauge anywhere from about 13.5 ounces up to about 1 pound 3 ounces. So a little bit of a sway in there, but we don't know what it is for a trigger or who did this trigger. If this was on a varmint rifle or a bench rifle or something, which we'll probably save this setup for one of those, it would be a little different story. But on a hunting gun, he wants something a little bit heavier. Because the big thing is, you know, Ruger never made a trigger quite this light, and it doesn't have any creep to it. I mean, this has been done very well, but we don't know who did this trigger job on it. But this is definitely not a factory Ruger trigger, so we're going to change it out to this Timney, the 1100 model for the M77s, because this one has the 3-position safety up here off the end of the bolt, where all the way back it is on safe and it's locked. When you move it to that middle position, middle position in here, you can at least open it, but you can't fire it. And then all the way forward is fire on these rifles. So you got to have the right one. The other ones, like my 338 Win Mag, has got it. It's an older one. It's got it down here on a tang. It takes a completely different trigger, which I could be wrong, but that might be the 601 model. I guess I forget what the numbers are, but this one takes the 1100 series. So we've already made sure that the gun itself is empty. I'm going to flip the thing over here, and we are going to take the 3 screws out of the bottom. You gotta open up this hinged floor plate on here. That'll come open. There we go. You've got one up here that goes down at an angle, and these 2 here are straight down. So we got to take all 3 of those out, and they are a standard bit in there. Alright, now it's loose. Let's go ahead, pull those off, set that out. Take the internal box mag out. That thing was also loose in there. There we go. Let's pop this up out of there. Ooh, check that out. Somebody tried putting some type of grease, ooh yeah, on there. Back end isn't so bad, but we got a little bit of rust going on the side of that. So this does go to show that every once in a while you should pop your action out of the stock and take a look at it clean out from underneath there, because you can tell somewhere along the line somebody decided they were gonna put a little grease or something down inside there, and right out there in the end of that stock for some reason. And I would say that may have actually caused a little bit of the rust that we see here, because it doesn't look like regular grease in there. I don't know if that was some type of lithium. It's kind of waxy. I don't know what that stuff is, but it's rusting, so we should probably clean that stuff up for him too while we're doing this. So now that the side adventure of cleaning up the rust on this barrel is all finished, let's take a look at what comes in the kit. They give you a new trigger right there and a new sear. They also give you a new spring and a very small Allen wrench in there. What you will need is possibly a small little 3/16 wrench to adjust that right there. That is a stop, or used as a stop on there for travel. And you will also need an 1/8" punch so that we can drive the pins out of this thing. I should also mention, most importantly, it does come with stickers. Alright, so the first thing that we need to do is take this pin out of here. And obviously we got the bolt and everything out of here, so, but just put your thumb on top of this, because this is, you know, under spring-loaded pressure. So just kind of push down on it slightly. Take your finger and just push that back out of there. Don't let that fly across the room. Pull the punch back out. Just lift that right out. And then that spring comes right out with this old trigger. So next step, we got to take the sear pin out of there. Just push that on through. Set it right down here, and now the sear, just drop that right out of there. You don't have to take that spring out. Now I'm going to take a Q-tip. Since we got all that out of there, we might just as well clean that up, because there's a little bit of that grease or whatever they used the last time they did something to this. And I am under the mindset of just keeping all of that stuff dry, that way it doesn't collect dust and dirt in there. So I don't lubricate any of these parts as we put them back in. So now to install the new sear, just take it and you can just pivot it down into the action in here underneath the spring. Let me tip this here and show you. There's the spring right here, and that's what runs on the detent for your safety. And there, you can see that working. So you don't have to take that out. Just take this, just slide it right underneath there, and then take your pin, slip it right back in there. On this one, it does feel like that's got a slight burr on that side, so it kind of stops it flush right there. All right, make sure we're setting this down in this cradle on the ring. That way we're not putting pressure on the scope here. It's all actually on the ring itself. Now, installing the trigger and the new spring. Inside the trigger here, that is cut out, and that spring will sit right down inside there. The other part of the spring right here, there's that pin on that sear. It will drop right over top of that and sit right on there. So now we can just take that trigger, just kind of set the spring on there, fall right down into there, and put the pin back in. There it is. installed. Now, check that motion. Got just a little bit of movement. Spring looks like it's seated down in there good. Let's put the bolt back in this thing. So, since this isn't releasing the actual firing pin, that means this little nut right here, we need to bring that pin up further to give the trigger more travel to be able to drop the sear notch out from underneath the firing pin. So we use our small little wrench, and we are gonna break that loose. It didn't take much. Now I'm gonna go ahead and give it some room. Now we're gonna take that Allen wrench that they gave us, and that fits right inside of this screw. So I backed that nut off a ways, and what we're gonna do is put a little bit of tension on that trigger, and we're gonna rotate it counterclockwise to back it out until it falls. We're right there. Now leave that sit. Let's cock that again and try it. Yep. Now we got enough clearance. And you may give it just a little extra, but that's gonna increase your over travel in there. Just for insurance, we'll give it just a little tweak, just a little bit further. Now we got to tighten that nut back down, and it doesn't have to be too tight. There we go. So now that we have the travel screw set, the next thing that we need to check is the safety that's on the other side. And I can already tell by looking at it from here that we are not going to have clearance when we try to turn that. You can see that right there, that is up too high, and I'm sure that they make this piece thick enough for that exact reason, that over the years there's probably been multiple settings on these triggers, and I don't know if this is the original one or not, but if we can get that to focus, you can see that right in there. That's exactly what happened with that one. It got ground to fit so that that little piece, when we turn this and this goes to rotate, it's supposed to slide right under that notch and just barely clear in there. So this is where things get hairy with this trigger, but it's a good thing that I do have a gunsmithing degree, and that for over the past decade I have worked with 4 really good gunsmiths. So stuff like this I can definitely handle. So I'm going to take this trigger back out of here and start filing on this. If you choose to do this yourself, I mean, take caution, because if you take off too much, then that safety will not engage far enough, and when you pull that trigger, even with the safety on, it will still release that firing pin. So I'm going to go ahead and take this back out. I'm going to put some Dykem on it and make some marks, and then I'm going to go ahead and start filing on this and get that notched down on the back side of this trigger. That way it will just barely clear. We just barely want to get underneath of that thing with that safety when it is cocked. It needs to be under pressure. That way this is raised up as much as possible. That way, you can see here, after if we let that down, that drops. So we need to have it just barely clear when it's in the up position. So to save some time on this video, I am going to go ahead and not show you me just filing away on this painstakingly, because otherwise this would be a really long video watching me file that down ever so slightly at a time. So, just got done filing that out. Here is the old trigger. See the notch that they cut out right there. And then on here, there is the notch that I filed out right there. So before I put this back in here, hopefully for one last time, the small Allen wrench that they gave you that adjusts that screw right there also goes down into that little hole, and underneath here, if you can see that, that presses that down, and that's where the spring seats. And if we put that in here and turn it down, then it will compress that spring, and that's how it adjusts the trigger pull weight. So let's check my fit here. I've already had this in and out of here probably 4 times. Drop it right down in there. Put that pin in there. Now, goes to half. Oh, there. Goes to half. Get you a little better look at that, hopefully from the other angle right here. Just slides right underneath there. Give you a little different look here. That piece, if you look at it right there, slides underneath there. Now, when we pull the trigger, or try to pull the trigger, it can't move because this piece is now underneath there. That'll work. Now let's put the stock back on this thing and make sure everything goes back together correctly. Which, ooh, I can feel some resistance right there. Yeah, push that forward. Right here on the side of that trigger, we're touching a little bit. We're going to have to take a little bit out of the inside of the stock on there. So we'll have to clearance that just a 1/16 or so is what I got to take off of that. So, a little bit of filing, about 8 seconds worth of dremeling. And let's drop this on here. Yep. It's got plenty of clearance on that side. We ought to be good to go. On these Rugers, that front screw goes down at an angle and pulls down and forward into that recoil lug. So always do that front screw first. Depending on your stock, that is kind of what your torque setting should be, whether it's just a polymer one, a laminate one, or like this where you've got a aluminum bed block, or if it's a chassis, your numbers are all kind of different. On these ones with the aluminum in them, you can afford to tighten them down just a little bit more, but regardless of what you pick, always start with the front one first and then do your back ones. Alright, that looks like that's engaging properly for the bottom metal. And there we have it. That part's back up and running. Let's go ahead, put the bolt back in here. We got everything torqued down. Now let's go ahead, give it a little bit of a safety test here, or function test per se. So bolt runs, flip it off, fire, still run the bolt, flip it to safe, and then pull the trigger, nothing happens. Now, when we flip it off of safe and into fire, it still didn't go off. So, always a good thing. Flip it back around. Let's try that trigger. Very little movement in this Timney. And I would say probably just over 2 pounds. In the box, I believe they say that this thing should be like 1.5 pounds to 2 pounds. On the trigger pull gauge here. Okay. 2 pounds, 10 ounces. Get that. 2 pounds, 13 ounces. 2 pounds, 9 ounces. So, yep, about 2.5, a little over 2.5 pounds. So, that ought to do. One other little safety test that you can kind of do is this right here. I always drop them. I'll do it down here on the concrete floor. A couple times. Make sure that we're not just gonna bump this thing and have it go off. Apparently our aluminum caps are a little bit loose. There we go. But it's not going to just accidentally go off on you when you're out there hunting, thumping it against logs, whatever. You know, the last thing you want to do is bump your gun and it just goes off magically. You know, you don't want it to be like a SIG. We took out a great target trigger to put in a little bit more of a hunting weight trigger. And I guess we'll see, you know, how heavy my buddy wants it. But overall, fun little project. Not too complicated, but just, you know, you got to make sure that that safety works in there, that it functions in all 3 positions like it's supposed to. Well, hopefully you enjoyed today's video. I know I like working on guns, building stuff, doing projects like this. So if you liked it, go ahead, hit that like, share, and subscribe button for me and help me grow this channel. And hopefully, we'll see you on the next one.